Vidhammer Fantasy.
Welcome back to Vidhammer. I'm Spudlow, and in this video I'll be going over my 4th round matchup at the Crucible 3 Grand Tournament, where I go up against Nick playing the Tomb Kings. This is the first game of Sunday, but I'm not feeling too bad and looking forward to another fun game. Our scenario this round is Magic Flux. This is where if you roll doubles while casting during the magic phase, then you roll an additional d6. On a 1 or a 2, you give d3 dice to your opponent's dispel pool. On a 3 or 4, you lose d3 power dice, and on a 5 or a 6, you gain d3 power dice. My army list has gone over in a separate video. I'll put the link up for you. But as far as my spells go, my level 1 Warlock Engineer with the Warp Energy Condenser gets Warp Lightning. The level 2 gets Crack's Call and Skitterleap, while the Grey Seer ends up with Wither, Plague, Scorch, and the dreaded 13th. On my opponent's side, he has a level 3 Lich High Priest that gets the Incantation of Desiccation for -1 Strength and Toughness to a unit, the Incantation of Protection, giving one of his units a 5+ ward save, which is also boostable to give every unit within 12 inches the 5+ ward save, and the Incantation of Righteous Smiting to give +1 attack or multi-shots 2 to a unit. He also has High Queen Khalida, Miss Big Jugs herself, that goes with the large block of archers. I believe it is 40 archers that are 2 rows wide. A block of 6 chariots in the center, and several characters in with a skeleton block below it, including the Lich High Priest, a Tomb Prince with some gear that I don't recall, and a Tomb Herald BSB with the Banner of the Undying Legion, giving that unit a bound spell that allows them to regain models. He's also got a Bone Giant on the upper side of his line, a Necrosphinx near the center, and a Casket of Souls sitting on top of that upper hill. I put my Storm Vermin across from the archers, hoping they can close that distance and deal with them by themselves. The Doom Wheel is way up at the top, doing its own thing. I park my slaves between my Clan Rat blocks, and put my Warlord in the lower Clan Rats, hoping that he might end up in combat with those skeletons, and he might get some points off of 1 or more of those characters. He gets the +1 for the first turn, and rolls a 6, so I don't even bother. For the first turn, the Bone Giant charges my Gutter Runners, that are a bit off-screen more than likely. I underestimated his actual movement and charge distance, and he makes that one on a 9. I do a stand and shoot, but there's no wounds, no double tap on it. His other units move up a bit. It doesn't look too bad in the long run, so I'm not too worried about things at this point. I know my Gutter Runners are going to die, but at least they pulled the Bone Giant off to the side and give it a little bit of time before it can get back to the main battle. Magic is 10 versus 6. He uses the first 6 dice for the Casket's bound spell, Light of Death, and goes after my Warp Lightning Cannon, and kills it. Not too happy about that one. Then it bounces into my Hell Pit, but only does 1 wound, then goes into the Clan Rats for 3, and hits the slaves, but it doesn't do any wounds and manages to stop there. He used the last 4 for the Magic Missile from Khalida's bound spell, and I go ahead and dispel that with my 6. Over to shooting, where the chariots shoot at the Storm Vermin, but don't manage any wounds. The Archer block also shoots for the Storm Vermin for 9, thanks to Khalida's little ballistic skill buff there. The Screaming Skull Catapult shoots for my Clan Rats that have the Grey Seer in it. I imagine he's hoping that they'll get a panic and run off the board, but it drifts and fails to wound. A late terror test in the combat phase for my Gutter Runners, but it's passed, and they pass their fear test as well. The Gutter Runners do manage a couple of wounds, but both of them get saved. All of the Giant's attacks manage to miss, but he follows up with a Thunderstomp for a single wound. That's enough to win the combat, though, and the Gutter Runners fail their break test on a 5 and get cut down when they flee. On to my turn. I move up and keep my troops away from the Doom Wheel. Warp Fire Thrower is set to stand and shoot and potentially redirect into the clan rats after its death. I don't have anything set up for the countercharge though, but I'm hoping that they'll stay steadfast for a turn if it comes to that. My magic phase is 10 versus 5, and I use the first 4 for Plague on the skeleton unit, but it gets dispelled with his 5 dice. The last 6, I go ahead and go for Dreaded 13th on the skeletons, and it actually goes off, not irresistible though, and he dispels it with the scroll. In shooting, the first cannon shoots for the Necrosphinx and manages to get through the saves, but I only roll 1 wound. Then the Doom Rocket hits the skeleton block for 9 wounds. I've got to try and get that block down and actually get those characters. Also, having had enough of the static terrain, I just put a single model out front to mark where the front of each unit is. As nice as the hills look, they can be a little annoying. Finally, the Doom Wheel fires off its bolts and gets a couple of wounds of its own. For turn 2, the Skeletons, Chariots, and Necrosphinx all charge the Hell Pit Abomination. I wasn't totally expecting that. They all make the distance, but there isn't enough room for the Necrosphinx to make it, so it fails its charge. Magic this time is 12 versus 5. The first 6 go for Light of Death on the giant rats, and knowing its potential to bounce into stuff that I don't want to have destroyed, I go ahead and dispel this with my scroll. The scenario effect takes effect here, even though the spell was dispelled. We didn't see anything that still prohibited that, so we rolled for the effect, and he ends up having to give me 3 of his dice. So he uses his last 4 for +1 attack, and I go ahead and dispel that with my 9 dice. In shooting, the archers fire into the Doom Wheel this time for 3 wounds, and the catapult hits the clan rats again, but misfires and can't shoot this turn. Sweet Lovin' makes a good stand for it all, and actually manages to deal out more than he gets wound-wise, but he still loses the combat with the flank rank in charge. He fails the stubborn break test, but manages to get away, with the chariots overrunning into the clan rats. Here come my ultimate charges into the flank of the chariots. I want to get the slaves into combat, and that means getting the clan rats in, so the slaves can actually close the door. That, in turn, means getting the Warp Fire Thrower out of the way, so I go ahead and have that one charge in as well. The Warp Fire Thrower is the linchpin to the whole operation, and I need to roll a 5 to get the charge, so, of course, I roll double 2s. So it fails, which causes the clan rats to auto-fail, which causes the slaves to auto-fail, which basically causes me to auto-fail. Otherwise, I move some things around, but I don't know. I kind of stay in that moment for the rest of the game. Magic is 9 versus 5. I use 4 dice for Scorch on the skeletons, and he dispels it. Then I use 4 more for Plague, and I got a couple of doubles. I kill off 12 of the skeletons, and put a wound on the BSB and the High Lich Priest. And I give him the last of my dice from the scenario effect. The Doom Wheel misfires and runs closer to the Bone Giant. Thanks for that one. Cannon shoots for the Necrosphinx again and falls short. Then we do our combat, where the clan rats get impacted by the chariots and all but decimated. The Warlord does what he can, but I still lose the combat by a ridiculous amount. They fail the break test and get cut down when they run, with the chariots overrunning into the Hell Pit once again. Now for the Tomb Kings. The Necrosphinx charges the clan rats, and since I know they're going to lose and break and run, I have them flee instead. Maybe I'll get lucky and they'll rally. He could redirect into the Warp Fire Thrower, but he doesn't want to risk the stand and shoot reaction. Bone Giant charges into the Doom Wheel now that, he was able to make it a little easier for him. Magic is 8 versus 3. He uses the first 2 for Invocation of Smiting on the chariots. I know that combat's gonna, go its own way, so I don't worry about that. He uses the next 2 for the skeleton unit's bound ability so they can regenerate models, and I go ahead and dispel this with my 3. My only chance of really getting back into this is taking that unit out. He uses the next 3 for -1 toughness on the storm vermin, and there isn't anything I can do about it. And the last 2 also for the casket on the giant rats, who take 5 wounds and pass the panic test, and the spell doesn't bounce either. Archers shoot into the storm vermin for 13 wounds. That's a big hit, but they're still kicking. Catapult also shoots for the storm vermin, but it drifts off. The Hell Pit and the Doom Wheel both get taken down in this round, with the chariots and the bone giant overrunning. At first, I think this might be good, since the chariots don't end up on top of where the Hell Pit died, and it might get to stand back up. But unfortunately, the rat swarms pop out. This turns out to be the one outcome that I didn't actually want. I made a bit of an error here, because I thought that the rat swarms would immediately charge the closest enemy unit if one was available. But I had my rules crossed, and it's only giant rats that do that. This was a big error on my part because the rat swarms, as I feared, end up charging into the skeleton unit. I was planning on casting Dreaded 13th into that unit and trying to clear out all of those casters for a huge bucket of points in my magic phase. But now I can't because they're in combat. I am able to get the storm vermin into combat with the archers though, so hoping that's going to go well. Slaves charge the War Sphinx, and my Grey Seers unit actually manages to rally. What an amazing turn. Magic is 5 versus 3, and I use all 5 of my dice for Plague on the skeleton unit, since I can't go for the 13th, and he gets an irresistible dispel, so I suppose in the end it wouldn't have happened anyway. I did get doubles, and we rolled for the scenario effect, but I didn't have any dice left to give him. My cannon shoots for the Bone Giant this time, hoping I might have a better chance of killing that thing off than the Necrosphinx, but it falls short, so it doesn't really matter. In the Storm Vermin combat, the Assassin pops out and is actually able to kill off High Queen Khalida, but the Assassin dies in Khalida's backlash. A little bit of rage there. I reform the Storm Vermin to 1 wide, but we don't have enough time for a whole nother round, so that's where we have to call the game, right after the Necrosphinx stomps on some slaves and they explode. It's kind of like the fireworks at the end of the baseball game, I suppose. Final score ends up 16-4, and after the bonus scenario points, it's 20-6. So another crushing defeat at the start of my day. I think I'm going to go put my Warp Fire Thrower under a car tire and watch what happens. Thanks for watching this battle report. Be sure and check back for new videos each week. Do me a favor and subscribe. Like the videos if you want to see more, and feel free to leave comments if you have any tactics or matchups you'd like to see. Check it all out on Facebook and Twitter as well. Till next time from Vidhammer, keep fighting.